All right, what is up, everybody? We are live today, a live episode of the Mafia Members Podcast. We'll introduce our guests coming up here in a minute, so we'll jump right into it.
The Mafia Members Podcast.
Where else would you rather be than right here, right now?
What is up, everybody? I'll introduce our guest, Michael, as known on the Pat McAfee show as the Ripper. Why don't you go ahead and introduce ourselves, tell us where we can find you, everything that you do.
Well, first off, Ben, you invite me to this Mafia's Members Podcast for the Buffalo Bills, and you make me sit through intros where I'm just watching Buffalo Bills highlights. I feel like I'm being punked in the Buffalo version. And the only good thing was there wasn't too many Dolphins on the other side of those highlights. I can't believe I just had to witness that. You couldn't just invite me 2 minutes after you started.
I like to set the mood, set the vibe, set the tone.
I almost exited out of this entire thing, but I'm a trooper here. And no, look, as you know, my name is Michael RIppe. You can find me on social media on X at Michael RIppe. Pretty easy to right there. I do have a YouTube channel which just started. That is where we stream live. Also to X, the morning after football, which is a Monday morning show from 7:30 a.m. Pacific till 9. So 90 minutes leading you into Pat McAfee show and giving you sort of all the breakdown of not just real but fantasy football. And that's where you find me.
Right on. Awesome, man. Can't wait to get into it. Well, we will have some fantasy questions for you later on in the show. So, but first we'll just talk about week one. A couple questions for week one there. We see the Thomas jersey hanging up in the background.
And Jason Taylor.
And the Jason Taylor jersey. So how do you think you guys did week one? Obviously, it was a tight game against the Jags, but it was on at the same time as the Bills, so I didn't get to see the game. So how do you guys think you did?
Yeah, you know what's funny is so I watch all the games same time. Obviously, when the Dolphins are playing, I have a little focus on that. But let's be honest, if you watch the games at all, Miami snuck one out. Jacksonville should have won the game this week in week one. They were the better team on the field for the majority of the game, and the fact that the Dolphins won was a shock. They didn't play like they wanted to win, especially in the first half. But at the end of the day, a win's a win. You know that as a Bills fan, as any fan, and there was a lot of similarities between both Miami's game and Buffalo's game in the sense that early on it looked like not just Jacksonville was dominating Miami, but Arizona was dominating Buffalo. And it really felt like you could see Arizona beating Buffalo, and I thought Jacksonville was going to beat Miami. And so, you look at week one, both teams, Buffalo and Miami, got the W. Buffalo much more impressive, especially as the game went on. But both teams both came back from, 2 touchdown deficits. So I think in Buffalo's setup, it looks better. They played, Arizona, which was high flying, exciting, and they came back and won that game. And they had 9 different receivers catch a pass. So from a Buffalo standpoint, that was great to see if you're a Buffalo fan. And then, for Miami, the game definitely turned in the second half. And there's some things that you could take away as a Dolphins fan and as a Dolphins player to get ready for the early and quick turnaround into this week 2 game with between Buffalo and Miami.
Yeah, right on. And that's when I recorded my show after the game. That was kind of my saying or the thing I kept saying was a win is a win. We're just week one is such a crapshoot, really. You don't know what your team is going to look like or how the plays are going to play out and who there's always a surprise team, so you don't know what's going to be your matchup is like. So it was nice to just get out of there with a win.
And let's be honest, look, as someone that's been obviously a Miami Dolphins fan for 30 plus years, but AFC East observer and big NFL fan for forever, the week one is just week one. Ultimately, like you said, a win's a win, a loss a loss. They all count the same. Doesn't matter if you're in New Orleans this week where you blew out the Panthers. Counts the same in the standings as if you won by 1 point or at the buzzer like the Dolphins. More importantly, we've seen this plenty of times in the past. You don't just take week one and believe that that's the season, because using Buffalo as an example, I can think back to the last decade, a decade ago or so, when they blew out the Patriots 31-0 in week one. The Patriots went on to win the Super Bowl that year, right? And so you can't look at week one and just automatically say, well, season's done. We're locked in. We know who's good and who's not. Things change quickly. So week one in a couple of weeks will be a long thing in the past.
Yeah. We can when we're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals after the loss to the Patriots, but they do suck. But my next question for you was, what was your takeaway, your biggest takeaway from the game? Was it the team's ability to kind of come back? Was there a certain player or group that stood out to you, or what was your biggest takeaway from the game?
Yeah, I guess for Miami, there was a couple takeaways. One, the resilience that they showed in the second half was surprising and nice to see, because they looked flat and like they didn't want to be there in the first half, which was surprising because you expect the Miami Dolphins offense to come out in week one of the season humming with all the preparation for that game, with the play scripted and so forth. So that was surprising. But the biggest takeaways, I think, was the second half and the defense, because obviously Miami has a new defensive coordinator, and Anthony Weaver comes over from Baltimore. Vic Fangio left, and maybe it started slow, but that second half, it looked like Miami had found a solid defense. I mean, they shut Jacksonville out. They're able to come back, and Javon Holland makes a huge play, which he is an all-pro type of safety, makes plays all the time.
Canadian, by the way, Canadian.
I mean, he's a heck of a player. We're lucky to have him in Miami. But so he makes a big play, game-saving, game-changing play, and then the Dolphins started to go and get it going. So the second half defense is something that I took away as something that's really impressive and something to watch. And also the return of Jalen Phillips. Suffered a catastrophic injury late in the season last year against the Jets. He's a great player, and he was back week one, healthy, and he had a sack. So from a Dolphin standpoint, you love to see that, especially because if you're looking at that Miami defense, it's that defensive line that is going to concern you, and their ability to sort of stop the run game and get after the passer. And that's going to be important against Buffalo.
Yeah, and especially after you lost Christian Wilkins, I'm assuming as well, like you have extra question marks around that position group.
I mean, it's not just that Christian Wilkins left in the offseason. Bradley Chubb hasn't come back yet, obviously. And so, we've got rookies that were drafted, but rookies take time. And so, yeah, that was, from a Dolphin standpoint, impressive to see. And you love to see a guy that, gets hurt and was crying last year on the field when he got injured, to be able to come back. Jalen Phillips, everything you read about him or hear about him, he's a great guy. And for him to have a sack in that game was awesome.
Yeah, for sure. So the last one we'll touch on for week one, is obviously the situation with Tyreek. The body footage camera from the cops has been released. So I don't know. Do you see any kind of issues? Like, obviously he's in the starting lineup for tomorrow, but you see any issues for him kind of maybe next week 3, or what's the deal with Tyreek essentially?
I think the reality is, and I don't want to get too deep into off the field stuff, because everyone can watch the video and make their own conclusions. Ultimately, you'd like to see situations like that not happen, right? And obviously, when it comes to you just thankful that nothing got worse than it was or escalated even further. I think that it could have been handled across the board much better and in a safer and much more relaxed method, but it is what it is. I don't think that on the field it had too much of an effect, because look, the first play after the turnover from Miami defensively that Javon Holland made, they had an 80-yard bomb to Tyreek. And so even though it wasn't a great Tyreek game, if you watch Tyreek routinely, still got 7 catches for 100+ yards and a touchdown, and was an impactful player like he is. I think he's the best wide receiver in football, hands down. And so as far as how that it's affecting his play in the field, I guess we'll have to see continued. But I think that when he steps on the field, it's just a different vibe.
Yeah, no, he's definitely someone that commands that respect from everybody on the like every defense that they go up against is, how are you stopping Tyreek is the first question that gets asked.
And people ask me this, and they like to debate. And look, there's tons of great receivers in the NFL right now. We're lucky as fans in general, but Tyreek does something that no other receiver can do. I mean, he puts the entire defense, in this element of, where is this guy? How do we stop him? Because he's just different. Because he's not your prototypical wide receiver where he's just tall and fast and catches jump ball. I mean, he can stop on a dime and catch these quick outs, and you just can't really cover that. And so he offers this different element from the receiver position that I don't think anybody else does in the league. And so for me, he's the most challenging for any defense to try to stop. And so, right now, I didn't see anything in week 1 that would lead me to believe any of that off-field stuff affected him. Obviously, we'll have to see continuously what looks like, next weeks 2 and weeks 3. But I think Tyreek, the football player, looks to be in prime form.
Yeah, he's kind of that perfect, like, everybody wants, like, you can either get a big wide receiver or a fast wide receiver or a wide receiver who can catch, but he kind of, mixes it all together with the amount of speed that he has and his catching, like, it balances it out to be, I think Justin Jefferson is number 1, but I can definitely see the argument as to why he's my very close second wide receiver in the league.
Yeah, but let's be real. If Tyreek signed with Buffalo, who's the best receiver in football?
I think Justin Jefferson.
I would say Justin. I don't know. I'd have to see that. I'd have to see. That's fine. I get it. I mean, Justin Jefferson's a great receiver.
Yeah. Okay, so we will talk about week 2. So what did you see from week 1 that you think needs to carry over into week 2, to kind of give you guys for you guys to get a win this week?
Yeah, I think for the Dolphins to get a win, that second half defense that I talked about, that shut out the Jaguars, that got them off the field on third downs, that looked like it was a different defense than the first half, that defense has to show up for 60 minutes. It's got to show up in the first.
I think we
Did it freeze?
There? Yeah, I think we're back now, though. Oh,
I'm here. Okay.
Oh, I think you're back now.
We good? Sorry, I don't know what happened there. We got a little frozen action.
Yeah,
I don't know what happened there. But anyways, I hope you heard my point, which was basically that second half defense that Miami showed against Jacksonville. That's got to carry over for 60 minutes, a 4-quarter game against Buffalo if Miami wants to have a chance to win this one.
Yeah, right on. I kind of think the same, and that'd be my same answer for Buffalo would be, we obviously got off to a very rocky start against Arizona, and they put up 17 quick points. And Miami is a very fast team. They like to score quick. They'll put up points quick, and so Buffalo needs that second half defense to show up to kind of try and slow down what Miami does well.
Mm-hmm.
So what's something that you didn't like from them in week 1 that needs to kind of be nipped in the bud?
Well, you can't start slow. I mean, it like I said, the Dolphins, they've got to put points on the board. They need to extend the drives that they're having and then finish them. They didn't do that against Jacksonville. And then ultimately, they need to get Devon Achane in space. Because when you get Devon Achane in space, he's a playmaker at the highest level in the NFL. He's another guy that in space, really hard to bring down. He's super fast, obviously, and can make plays if he has any room. And so you saw this in the first game. They were throwing sort of outs to him. He was more receiver-like than just running back, and they were getting him out there in space in the flat, letting him then just use his quickness, his twitch ability to make, significant chunk plays. And for Miami to have success against Buffalo, he's going to have to be a key participant. And then I'd also love to see, obviously, I think you want to get Tyreek more targets than he had in week 1. And also, I'd love to see them involve Jonnu Smith a little bit.
Okay, right on. Is Achan injured? Is he?
Yeah, he's questionable right now. My guess is I think he plays. If he doesn't, we'll obviously see a heavy dose of Jeff Wilson, but also Jalen Wright, who hasn't played an NFL game. He was inactive in week 1. So, I'm not going to sit here and speculate. Obviously, we've seen, preseason. We know the tape on Jalen Wright. He could be another type of these really fast running backs in the NFL that could be good. But I don't like to take what you see from college or preseason and start to act like that's what we're seeing in the NFL, because until you do it in the NFL, I don't believe it. But we would see them if Achan can't play, and that would be tough for Miami to overcome, not just having no Mostert, but no Achan.
Yeah, because Mostert's already out, right?
Mostert is out. That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So what would you say is the key? Obviously, the Bills, like you had mentioned before, the Bills spread it out to 9 different wide receivers in week 1. Obviously, the key to stopping Buffalo is stopping Josh Allen, because he is the offense. So what do you think, or how do you think Miami, like what's the best way to go about it? What do they got to do to stop the Bills?
Yeah, so when you say like you got to stop Josh Allen, and so for first, I mean, the big key in these games in general is, and oftentimes in the NFL specifically, is you got to get off the field on third down. Third down is such a key component to the game. Get your defense that rest, change the momentum. And so you got to get off the field on third down. So that Dolphins defense has to be able to get off the field on third down. Secondly, when you talk about stopping Josh Allen, no one is stopping Josh Allen. It's not how it works, right? I mean, Josh Allen, as much as I wish I could come on here and tell you Buffalo sucks and Josh Allen this, that, and that. Josh Allen is a great quarterback. He's been probably my favorite player on another team now for a while. I love to watch the guy play, except when he's playing Miami, obviously. But, I look at it as more you got to contain Josh Allen. And so Josh Allen's going to do Josh Allen stuff, right? But if you can contain him so he's not getting 4 touchdowns a game, where he's making that sort of one decision that's poor that we've seen from him a lot, throughout, seasons and stuff, that's how you have to go in and approach the Josh Allen, right? He's going to make plays, he's going to scramble and get these, first downs, and he's going to make fan loving plays, team inspiring plays that get you riled up and excited to play with him. Really, I think they need to pressure him and just contain him and see if some of the new receivers have what it takes, because especially when it comes to Miami Buffalo, we can talk about a rivalry because it's Miami Buffalo, and traditionally the rivalry has been very one-sided for a while now, especially since Josh Allen has been the quarterback in Buffalo. Buffalo owns Miami, and until Miami can beat Buffalo, not just one time, but a couple times, it's not going to really change the dynamic there. It was close last season to get to, who was going to win the AFC East, but Buffalo pulled it out. Miami needs to be able to contain Josh Allen, see if these new guys can show up for Buffalo, and then conversely test the Buffalo defense, because that's where I think Buffalo is short this year. It's in that defense, right? And 100%. None other than the loss of Matt Milano. Matt Milano has been a guy that has dominated the series with Miami, making 10 tackles a game, kind of shutting down the offense at some levels. He's not there for this game Thursday night, week 2. Miami needs to be able to take advantage of that. And in my opinion, this is the best opportunity Miami has had against Buffalo in a while, but it all comes down to what we see on the field.
And we're also down to Ron Johnson too, and that's going to be a huge loss for us this week. What else do I got for you? Okay, so the Bills defense looked a little shaky against Arizona. We are obviously just talking about that. So you mentioned getting more targets to Tyreek Hill, but how do you without Milano being there, how do you kind of exploit that? Like, is it more maybe like you said, going to Jonnu Smith, or is it more maybe drag routes across the middle, kind of where Milano would be, or how do you exploit that?
Yeah. Look, I think we sort of have said it, but it is kind of what you're saying. It's those drag routes across the middle. Test those linebackers. They can't keep up with the speed, because nobody can keep up with the speed that the Dolphins have. And so it's these quick plays that can, gain chunk yards, that can get the defense tired, get them out of position. And that involves not just what I said before with Achan in space, but also Tyreek over the middle, Waddle, maybe test the linebackers with Jonnu. That's where I think the Dolphins need to attack this game and Buffalo's defense.
Yeah. Okay. Right on. So now we'll get into the fantasy questions. I sent you two of them, but I got a third one for you that'll surprise you. So from this matchup alone, who are your must starts that'll be playing Thursday? I know kind of in the fantasy world, we like to maybe stay away from the Thursday nighters a little bit unless you have like a superstar. But like, so who's a kind of a must start?
Yeah. Look, normally on Thursday night, a lot of times you maybe want to sit players if you're on the fence. I think this game has pretty clear indications of who should start and who shouldn't. And from the Dolphins side, it's obviously Devon Achane. You're starting him if he's on your roster, and if you don't, I don't know what you're doing. But obviously you're starting Tyreek Hill and you're starting Jalen Waddle. Everybody else, I think, from the Dolphins side is a sit. And then conversely, if you look at Buffalo, it's the same thing. Obviously starting Josh Allen, and I think you're starting James Cook. If you have Dalton Kincaid, you probably are starting him. You maybe have another option, which I wouldn't be opposed to starting. If, let's say, you had Isaiah Likely, I'd probably start Likely over Dalton Kincaid. But, if you drafted Kincaid early, I would start Kincaid. But I'd be on the fence with him. Other than that, though, it's Josh Allen and James Cook on the Buffalo side.
Yeah. And then the who are the people to sit? Like, I know me in particular, I'm sitting the Bills defense just because I never liked the matchup with Miami. So who else would you have as a sit?
I would sit everybody I didn't mention. So if I didn't mention them, sit them. But if you're thinking about players that you might actually have, I'd be sitting. Obviously, you're sitting Raheem Mostert. He's not playing, so you got to make sure to sit him. And then I wouldn't be playing the Miami defense. I wouldn't be playing the Buffalo defense. None of the Buffalo wide receivers like Shakir or anyone or Coleman. I mean, I'd like to see more from them if I was going to start them in fantasy than just going with it right now. I think it's too early to throw them into the starting lineup. But pretty obvious who to sit, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So I got a question for you. I tried to get a running back off the waiver wire this morning, but I lost my bid. So now I have the top 3 available running backs in my league that I need to pick. So I got Matt Madison, Trey Benson, or Gus Edwards.
Yeah, so I would go with Alexander Madison right now. He had more of the bulk of carries and share of time in Las Vegas. I like Gus Edwards most coming into the season only because I think the Chargers are going to run the ball and then run the ball more. And I don't trust that J.K. Dobbins can stay healthy. I think J.K. Dobbins is more talented running back and a better running back if all things are equal. But I doubt that Dobbins will stay healthy. I hope he does, but it's hard to believe that he will. And so I think Gus Edwards has a great opportunity to get cheap touchdowns and then have heavy volume at some point. So Gus Edwards is the type of guy where if I'm looking long-term, he's a guy that I sort of like to have on the bench or rostered as a backup to Dobbins, let's say. But Madison, I think in the near term has the best opportunity because I think he's actually going to get the bulk of the share of time in Las Vegas, even though, to be honest, I prefer not to have any action in the Las Vegas Raiders fantasy-wise.
Yeah. Okay, so then the follow-up to that would be right now my starting running backs are Kyron Williams and Jerome Ford, and I have Zamir White on the bench. So is it even worth it for me going after a running back, or who would I swap out to get one of those guys?
Well, quite honestly, I think you're okay at running back at your starters. But like I just said about the Raiders, I'm bullish on Madison and bearish on Zamir White. I would either try to trade Zamir White. I'd quite frankly probably just cut him. I don't think that Zamir White is going to offer anything this season on any level of consistent basis. And that's why I think Madison is a better own there. But even still, just don't want the Raiders. So I would look to see if I can trade Zamir White early after just one poor performance, because I actually don't think he's going to be the starter and have much of a role all season. I mean, it's kind of be a bit player. Yeah. So that's kind of the way I would look at it. But that's
my worry with Jerome Ford is he's obviously only going to be 6 or 7 weeks a starter, right?
Yeah. So here's the thing about, when you think about Jerome Ford, is like there's a lot of talk about Nick Chubb, but we don't know when Nick Chubb is actually going to come back. Just because he's on POP and he can't play 4 weeks doesn't mean he's coming back in week 5. And when he does come back, there's no doubt that he's not going to play, 100% of the time. It's going to take time to ramp up. So I actually have no interest in Nick Chubb this year, even though I think he's a great running back when he was healthy. I hope he comes back and is better than ever, but hard to believe that will be the case. And it quite frankly doesn't feel like it would be the case anytime soon, specifically this year. So I like Jerome Ford a lot. I would stick Jerome Ford in there for a while, and I would continuously monitor the league to see if I could trade Jerome Ford for someone great. But I think Jerome Ford is a great player this year to have in fantasy for a while. Because even if Chubb does come back, Ford's still going to be viable. He might not have the bulk of the carries at some point, but Ford's a player, and there'll be opportunities, I think, either to pick up another guy through waivers over the course of the season, or maybe move Ford as he continues to ball out.
Okay, right on. One thing I always wanted to ask you, because you do lots of fantasy stuff. One thing I always wanted to ask a fantasy guy is, how sick and tired do you get of the question, like, who's this year's Puka Nacua? Or, you know what I mean? Like, who's going to be this year's breakout guy?
Yeah, look,
I feel like that's everybody's question.
Yeah, everyone, I get it too, right? You want to find
makes sense.
But two things. One, you don't get like a Puka Nacua season every year, right? That's like that happens maybe every 3-4 years or 5. Like that's not like, oh, who's the Puka this year? And then boom, we got the Puka. Like who's Kyron Williams this year? It was like, oh, we got Kyron. This stuff doesn't happen like that. Sometimes you get lucky and there's a couple, and sometimes you get one, and sometimes it takes some time. So the reality is, I don't get too upset about any questions unless it's like a question where I've continuously answered it and then you're just not paying attention, asking it over and over. But look, I think most people want to know, start, sit, and I have a philosophy when it comes to this. Look, I put out a lot of content. If you're interested in the fantasy stuff on X, and I think it helps a lot of people win. You need a few things to win in fantasy. One, you need luck. And, let's not pretend you don't need luck. Everyone needs to get lucky at certain levels, but you can use some skill to set yourself up to have a better chance to get lucky. But reality is that I always want to find players that either are undiscovered at some level or have an opportunity to be much better than average. I don't really like playing with average players. And by average, I mean guys that sort of, they're okay. They're okay in the NFL, but they're not really elite, or they don't have potential to be elite. And those guys just kind of end up being sort of average. And if you're doing average things, you're getting average results. You don't want average results. You either want to be at the top or the bottom, in my opinion. So you want to go for the top. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. So it's kind of a philosophy that you want to take upside shots, not sort of have guys that are just kind of average.
Yeah. And shout out to Shadow Chasers. He says, give me HN or give me death.
All right.
All righty. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. It was awesome. Loved having you on. Tell everyone again what your shows are, your social medias, where they can find you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on a Buffalo show. Not sure why I had to sit through 2 minutes of Buffalo Bill highlights. I think that the host of the show should think about that in the future.
Noted.
After I have to sit through a Buffalo Bills reel. Anyways, I hope there's a lot of Miami highlights tomorrow night to get back at Bill Squad and anyone that watches this. Now, in all seriousness, this is fun. I love the NFL. I love all the teams to talk about it and stuff. And as much as I love the Dolphins, and there'd be nothing greater than winning a playoff game and then maybe a Super Bowl one day, who knows? We'll pray. It's always fun to break it down and chop it up with football fans across real football, fantasy. And you can follow me, obviously, as you see right here on X at Michael RIppe. You can subscribe to my YouTube, which also is streaming the newest show out the morning after, which is my take on giving you real football and fantasy analysis Monday morning, 7:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. We give you the hardest hitting 90 minutes in football that is probably the best show no one knows about yet. We'll know about soon. So, subscribe on YouTube, follow on X, hit me up, and hopefully you do really well, unless you're playing the Dolphins.
Right on. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks, everybody. This is the most amount of views I've had yet so far. So thanks everybody for joining, and go Bills.
Go Dolphins. Thanks for having me.